Taken Marc Cordon, Golden Mike podcast. If you've never met me before, I help people disrupt the status quo by getting on huge stages like TEDx events, huge podcasts, and digital courses, and a whole bunch of other things that disrupt the status quo. I want to get right to it today because we have someone who combines all the things that I love: neuroscience, education, mindsets, sense making, all of it and more, meaning making. I have someone who I met in this group of community builders called The Hive, which is run by Laura Zug, amazing community. And I've been wanting to talk to this guy one-on-one. It's sort of selfish because I want to talk to him the whole time. We have Mitch Weisberg, who had founded, I'm sorry, Mitch, I can't find the notes on you. We have Mitch Weisberg, who founded the Academic Business Advisor Group. And what's really cool is he's looking into what are the things that are going on in education and how can our mindsets actually hold us back from truly flourishing as individuals and as a community. Mitch, welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you. And would you mind, because my followers are going to be listening to this also, could you describe your background? Because it's important for them to know how phenomenal you are.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I actually majored in neuroscience and behavioral biology at Emory University. I then went and got a master's degree in public health focused on behavior change. And then I had the opportunity to work at a university when it came to curriculum, when it came to interventions with students. And they also paid for me going through a doctoral program in higher education. So, I mean, you put it all together and I get to talk to Mitch with that today.
Well, so, and you also, sorry to interrupt.
No, not at all.
You also spend time with people, helping them be more effective speakers, how to be more successful in life, how to be more successful business people. So you run a coaching organization.
And I do have a coaching degree in positive psychology and the use of positive psychology ideas in the work that we do every single day. Yeah. And one of the biggest things is that I will have a TEDx client come in, and I've seen them on the local national news. I've heard them on podcasts. Mm-hmm. They are incredible when it comes to their voice, but then they'll come in and it's a 90-second application video that they put out there and they cannot do it. And so in many ways, it's not the skill that I'm coaching around. It's more so the mindset. Why is a person who has all the skills not showing up? And so that's what I think about when I think about mindset. What about you, Mitch? How do you think about mindset?
So we don't teach mindsets to people, okay? And because of that, we end up being misled by our own brains, okay? And people who study how the brain works, like marketers, politicians, business executives, they end up manipulating us because they understand how the mind works. And we don't even realize that we can get out of those mindsets and we can take charge of our own lives and we can be more creative, we can be more resourceful, we can be happier. And those are the skills that, my goal is, there's 8 billion people on the planet, right? Roughly, okay? My goal is that if we can get 5 million people to be able to understand how to take control over their own minds, then we can start making real progress on all these issues that we face, and we can all start living better lives, more effective, happier, more collaborative.
So
that's my goal.
Yeah. So when you define mindset, what do you mean by mindset?
So it's some of it is attitude, some of it is our thoughts. The way I describe it in the course is that we make decisions, we make sense of the world on 2 different levels. That we have our primitive mind, which would be called our limbic mind, and we have our higher order thinking, which is, say, our prefrontal cortex. The way animals and we have evolved is that primitive mind makes decisions in 2 to 3 100ths of a second. And you can think of there's 2 different parts of I mean, there's hundreds, there's 100 different parts of the brain. A simplification, an oversimplification is that, you can think of these two different parts of this primitive part of the brain. One is the part that says, oh, this happened, we could do this, we could do this. And another part is the emotional part, which is always judging. And it's always, that emotional part is binary. It's just basically, this is good or this is bad.
And that's the limbic part, right?
They're both parts of the limbic, okay? They're both like, we don't even have to think about it. So the parts that and this isn't directly, I mean, it's a longer explanation of mindsets, but that limbic part of the brain that comes up with the things that we do, it's generally called, it's the heuristics part of the limbic mind. A heuristic is something that we can do without even having to think about it.
Yeah.
So that heuristics part of the brain comes up with things that we can do. We have to fight, or we have to run away, we should freeze, or whatever. And then the emotional parts of the brain says, let's do that, or let's not do this, give me another one. Let's not do that, give me another one. And then eventually it's like, okay, let's do that. Well, that all happens, it starts in like 2/100ths of a second. In less than a second, those parts of the brain can go through 30, 40 different things that we could possibly do, and they'll have decided what to do. Our higher order parts of the brain, which is basically in the prefrontal cortex, that wakes up in 2 to 3 seconds. So by the time our higher order parts of the brain wake up, generally the decision has already been made.
Yeah, completely.
And so what's left for the higher order parts of our brain to do is to come up with a justification for the decision that we've already made. And by default, that's what people do. And then they think of that as reality. But the brain wasn't designed to come up with what's true or what's real. The brain was designed to come up with what can allow us to survive.
Yeah, the reptilian part.
We get this reptilian part of the brain comes up with things that we need in order to survive, comes up with a thing to do. Our prefrontal cortex, which really gets involved with our ability to connect with other people, our ability to think critically, our ability to think creatively, our ability to self-regulate, all those things are in the higher order parts of the brain, but they get turned off by the limbic parts of the brain because the decision's already made. And even if you consciously directly try to challenge yourself, like, well, I don't have to do this, or whatever, the limbic parts of the brain then say, what I'm being challenged, that's a threat, okay, I better release cortisol,
the cortisol don't. Yeah.
Cortisol and adrenaline focus us on what those parts of the brain have already decided to do, and shut down the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
And you see that happening so often, is that you have a politician who says, we have a crisis in this country and we have to do X, okay? And then gets you in a fear mode, and you don't, most of us, we just think, well, that's the reality. But if we could step back and say, wait a minute, something, that's, they're appealing to my limbic parts of the brain. Let me just reset that part of the brain and let me tap into my creative and resourcefulness, and maybe there's other alternatives. And
completely.
And instead of going like this with, I'm hitting my two hands together, instead of fighting about every issue, we could be reconsidering and say, well, wait a minute, maybe there's something right about this side that I can pull, and maybe we can come up with something that's better than either side could come up with on its.
And on your website, you talk about that as being sort of the wisdom part of, wisdom. And how interesting is it that the wisdom takes that part of the brain is slower to come through, and then it's stopped. It's stopped by the reptilian part of the brain.
In all of us.
Yeah.
In all of us.
Yeah, completely. So, you talked about, or you're talking with your goals about, like, touching millions of folks to sort of start thinking about the fact that there are multiple parts of the brain, right? But when you're talking about like millions of folks, Mitch, are you saying that almost all of us have this mindset? And how do we actually acquire that kind of mindset? Is it biological, or
Well, so it's a combination of genetic, epigenetic, and learned behavior. So, genetic is built into our DNA. Epigenetic is parts of the DNA that get turned on or turned off by different chemicals in our body. And learned behavior is, things that we learn how to do. we are all, including me, too reptilian. Like I'm not different from anybody else. I've learned a lot of techniques so that I can recognize it, so I don't get trapped quite as often. And when I do get trapped, I can recover faster than I could have 5 years ago, which is faster than I could have 10 years ago. But we all get trapped, and we all have the ability of overcoming those traps and overcoming those obstacles that our own brain, poses in front of us.
Yeah, complete. Why isn't like I'm thinking about evolutionary, and at this point in evolution, why is the reptilian brain still showing up? We're not getting chased by the dinosaur. We're not in a fight or flight situation. And in fact, like I still see people, I'm one of them, who has a hard time falling asleep because there's so much stuff going in my mind. And whether I like it or not, whether I majored in neuroscience or not, I still am I go through those situations where fight or flight shows up and it's me lying in bed.
Yeah. So I can't say that there's one, why did we evolve this way? Well, we evolved that way for survival.
Right.
Not just, and it's not like people have evolved that way. From the point that we were a multi-celled organism, coming out of the ooze, we started evolving. The first neurons, were developed in order to allow us to move towards food or away from danger. From those neurons, that's been 2 billion years of evolution, and people have only been in existence for what, 100,000?
A little, yep.
Okay, so that's what, 1/1000th of 1% of the time that organisms have been in existence that had neurons and started accumulating multi-neurons to form these ganglia that then became the brain.
Walk us through it. Keep going.
So it's just, evolution of DNA is really, really slow. Of epigenetics is still very slow. But what human beings have the capacity is change, and that's probably why we become like the alpha predator on Earth. Okay, is that we can look at a situation and we can tap into our resourcefulness. What is it? Novel Harari I think he's from Israel. I think he's a psychologist or a psychological historian, but he has written 4 or 5 books where he says that it's because humans have developed the capacity to work together that we've reached the pinnacle. Like we're the top animal that's out there. We can adapt. Other animals don't have the ability to adapt that we have because they don't have that highly developed prefrontal cortex. But even that gets blocked, day to day.
Insane. Yeah, completely. Yeah. I just want to sleep, Mitch. That's all I'm asking for. I want to talk about decisions and how the brain makes decisions and that affecting the way that we make decisions. Talk about the decisions.
So again, most decisions are being initially made in our limbic parts of the brain, and they're made, what I've been calling the heuristics, and I didn't come up with the term, but the heuristic parts of the brain. And there's really 5 types of decisions that the heuristic parts of the brain comes up with. The very first type of decision that can make is the freeze decision. As soon as babies are born, that freeze decision is the first thing that they can do, like just do nothing. The second 2 come pretty quickly after that, which is fight and flight. So those are the first of the 5 limbic types of decisions. So do I do nothing? Do I run away? Is this danger that I should fight? Then the next 2 aren't necessarily concerned with a survival instinct. Okay, one is, what are the things that I already know how to do that I don't even have to think about? So, like walking, okay? When you're walking, you can be thinking about something else. You don't have to think about walking. whichever side of it you're on, when somebody says something about guns, you know immediately what your reaction is. We
Yeah.
should either, if you're on one side, then we should ban them all. If you're on the other side, then it's, then we have to protect the rights of guns. But immediately, you don't have to think about it. That's your limbic. That's a heuristic reaction. It's one or the other. And then the third type of limbic reaction that human beings make is kind of mimicking or copying what other people in our group or our tribe are doing. And that helps us in learning, but it also helps us. We have this really strong drive to belong to a group and to copy what other people are doing. And so generally, if it's one of those five things that we're doing, we're almost definitely doing it because of a limbic decision. That doesn't make it wrong.
Yeah.
It just means that we didn't use our higher order parts of the brain in order to come up with that decision. And our higher order parts of the brain, until we can calm the reactions of saying, this is what I'm going to be doing, before we can until we can calm that down, we can't come up with other things to do.
I love how you call that a decision, right?
Yeah.
Because the knee-jerk reaction from me is, wait, I didn't make that nothing made that decision. But really, there's a stimulant coming in, brain's doing something, the reptilian brain is doing something, decision made.
Right. And so it could be that we're making the decision we're just doing something because there's some heuristic that we're doing. It could be that we first draw on a story that we already know, or a script. Well, script is really what we're doing, but a story that's going on in our brain. It's like, okay, this happened, it's like this, therefore I should do that. And that also is something that happens really quickly, primarily in the limbic parts of the brain, that then we get locked into in our higher order parts of the brain. Don't think critically about it, don't think creatively, don't think collaboratively. It's really just, this is what I've decided.
Yeah.
And if somebody questions it, then that's kind of a threat, because they're threatening my judgment. They're going against my judgment. And so then that exacerbates that, really, the fight or flight more often than not, and the release of cortisol, and which completely shuts down my ability to say, well, wait a minute, maybe they were right.
Completely. And if you're listening right now and you're like, what? We're kind of screwed because the wisdom part of the brain it's not showing up. It's not fast enough. Oh, that's probably why, Mitch, we're going to be talking about your courses in a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, and yeah, go ahead. And we could, but go ahead. No,
I do want to throw this out there, Mitch. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about this sort of mimic decision, suddenly this idea of, that's maybe where imposter syndrome comes from, is this idea that, because a lot of people will label imposter syndrome as something negative, but when you're talking about the mimic piece, imposter syndrome would be like, I want to be a part of the community. I don't want to, I do not want to be the odd person out. And that's when I'm thinking about, when you're talking about mimic, there's so much of my life that has the mimic part of the decision going on. And mm-hmm. I'm glad that you really, really pulled this up,
And there, there's a lot of books mm-hmm. that I pulled on in my material about why we go along with the rest of the group, and why it's such a strong urge, because it was so much based on, a human being could not beat a saber-toothed tiger, right? 50 human beings could if they're working in concert. Okay,
got it.
So it's a very strong survival skill that we have as human beings. But in modern society, it can also get us into a lot of danger. So in schools, the peer pressure, the bullying, one kid bullies another kid, and then everybody else piles on because you're part of the group. And if you can talk to these kids a couple days later, and when they're calmed down, you can say, well, wait a minute, don't you believe in treating everybody equally? Don't you believe in making people feel better? And it's like, oh yeah, well, how does that gel with what you just did to this person? It's like, oh yeah, I never should have done that. So kids, we know, we can think about it later. The question is how can we react more quickly and use our higher order.
Well, let's talk about this. You're talking about schools, and in terms of your ideas with the classroom and schools, you talk about it from the standpoint of not only the students but the teachers themselves. And let's dive into that ecosystem of, that we're talking about the brain. Why schools for you? Why schools, Mitch?
It's funny because when you were talking, I thought you were going in a different direction.
Yeah, I keep it fresh
Okay.
with you.
No. But
we can go there if you want.
No. So let me do the
Yeah.
what you asked, which is why school. So I've been involved in education really since 2001.
Okay.
My soapbox with education has been, that in the United States, about 30% of kids don't graduate high school. And so we failed those kids. Of the remaining 70%, more than half of them aren't prepared for and aren't prepared for college. So really, we failed those kids also. So that leaves another 30%. Those 30% of kids very often could have zoomed ahead with all the material, but because of the way we run our education systems, we're always keeping everybody together. You if you're in second grade, you can't read seventh grade books because this is the curriculum. You're going to read if you're capable of doing seventh grade math when you were in third grade, you're going to be doing third grade math, and if you get it done faster, we'll just give you more worksheets to do to keep you busy. So these kids could have zoomed ahead in many different areas, so we failed them also. So if you really look at it, our education system, which we created in order to help prepare kids to live good lives as adults, we're failing everybody. And but education could be a way that we really accelerate the growth of kids. And so that's been my mission for 20 years. That's what I've really wanted to do. And then when I started doing mind shifting, the first time I taught mind shifting was to a bunch of college kids. We call them college in the U.S. This happened to be in Niger, of all places.
Okay.
Not Nigeria. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the first time I heard about it is like, Niger, isn't that Nigeria? No. This is a different country. It's Niger, which is probably the poorest country in the world. And kind of like by weird circumstances, I ended up teaching two-day workshops for university students in Niger. So these were 18 to 25-year-olds, and they were being groomed to lead Niger forward. And at the end of the 2-day class, 70 kids stood up and cheered. Like, these were things that they were never taught in schools. They thought, they were sure that something was true, that maybe it's not true. They were sure they couldn't do something. Well, maybe they really could do it. They were told to do something, and so they didn't. Well, maybe they didn't need to do exactly what they were told. Maybe they could step back and become, and really talk to a person and collaborate and come up with something that's even better. So that convinced me that kids could learn this, that they really were hungry for it when they were exposed to it. And so the question in my mind was, so how do I reach kids? There's a very limited number of kids that I could reach, but what if I went to teachers or schools or districts? And so it's like, well, let me try to reach them through teachers or districts. And still, there's a limited number of teachers that I can teach at any one time. So then the next thing is, can I I've worked with a few people already, but how many people can I teach so that they can teach these skills to other teachers, so that it's not just me doing this?
Got it. This feels like a change in curriculum. So maybe you can elaborate on curriculum change versus mind shifting.
So this is not taught at all in school.
Okay.
So my vision is that if teachers understand these techniques, they themselves will be more effective teachers, and they find that they are, because they don't get thrown off by things happening. They don't They don't beat up on themselves every time something happens that wasn't exactly the way they expected. They don't get into these situations where one person has to be right and the other person has to be wrong. So they become more they become more proficient in what they're doing in the classroom with other teachers and their personal lives and everything. And they learn how to fold these techniques into how they're teaching kids so that kids can absorb these techniques also.
Got it. Got it.
It's really not, well, to a certain extent, you do have to take some time out, but what you end up with is that instead of having to police the kids understand the terms, they understand where they're going, and the kids become much easier to co-regulate, and eventually, not even eventually, but pretty quickly learn in many of these areas to self-regulate. Because you can just give them a couple terms like, wait a minute, do you think that's your saboteurs that are having you act this way? And it's like, well, yeah, so what are the ways that if your own saboteurs are holding you back, what are some of the ways that you know of to get out of that? Let me do this. And then you do that with a kid 2 or 3 times. The next time, the fourth or fifth or seventh, they're going to do it themselves.
Yeah. How awesome is that you can start bringing like emotional intelligence to like people, people in the classroom. I think it's awesome. It's awesome. What are some of the outcomes that you've seen as a result of this kind of intervention? Hey, are you picking up what I'm throwing down here? Are you digging the Joy Revolution podcast? If so, I invite you to subscribe on this platform. Now, if you want more, I have an online community called The Underground. It's free to sign up. In there, you'll find mini courses inspired by podcasts like this one. You get to connect with other community members. I'm in there. The link's in the description. Let's get back to the episode.
Well, so, I mean, in general, I see, people are happier. People don't get thrown by situations. People end up being more collaborative. Practically, when the teachers come into these courses, because teachers are overworked. Okay,
Yeah.
Every teacher I know is like, you're teaching, you're grading papers, you have all this paperwork that you have to finish, you're trying out new things. So it's not like people are that educators are saying, something, here's a really good course, let me take this. But teachers are required to take a certain number of hours of professional development. So when teachers come into the class, it's very often because their state has said, you have to have X out, this number of hours of professional development this year. Here are lists of courses that we've already approved. They go on to that. They see that mind shifting is one. They see that mind shifting advances critical thinking and perseverance and creative thinking in the kids. And they're thinking, well, something, I have to take a course. I've never heard of this before. This looks kind of interesting. And I want my kids to be able to think critically better. So let me take this course, because I have to take a course anyhow. Half an hour or 45 minutes of the course starting, you see a shift because the people taking the course are like, oh my gosh, I've been thinking about how I'm going to get my kids to live this way. This applies to me also. I can live a happier life. I get so many stories from people saying, my spouse and I have been having this fight for 10 years about this. After the first session of the course, I went back and I realized, something? That's my limbic mind. That's my limbic brain. Those are my saboteurs that are making me do this. I don't have to do that. And all of a sudden, the argument just disappeared because the argument really didn't mean anything. Or I've been, there's this middle-aged girl in my class, and she very often doesn't even come to class. She never does her homework. She sits outside the class sometimes. And in my mind, I had developed stories that she's lazy. She doesn't want to do the work. She's difficult. And I realized in the course that those are stories. And one of the things that one of the powers that we teach in the course is the power of empathy. So this one teacher says, something? I decided that I was going to approach this girl using the powers of empathy and explore. So she was sitting outside the classroom. I just walked outside the classroom and I said, oh, what are you doing? And then I looked and she was watching reels. And I said, oh, what reels are you watching? She says, cooking. And So the teacher says, well, so that surprised me because I never thought she'd be watching cooking. So I said, I watch a lot of cooking shows too. I love to cook. And that surprised the girl. And she says, we got into this conversation, and this seventh or eighth grade girl, there's no mom in the house. She has three younger siblings. It's just the dad and the grandparents. And she's taken on the roles of cooking and cleaning and taking care of the kids. So I said to her, is part of the reason that you're not coming to the classes and everything because at home you're basically taking on the role of an adult, and here we're treating you like a little kid. And she says the tears formed in the girl's eyes, and she says that's exactly what happens. I'm actually very smart, and I could be doing these different things, but I don't want to be treated like a 2-year-old. And so the teacher kind of reported that from that moment on, she was able to have rapport with this girl, and the girl started attending classes more. And when when she wasn't attending classes, it wasn't like she was being punished. It was more from mutual respect standpoint. So that's the type of thing that I see happening again and again and again from people taking the course.
I love that, Mitch. And you're talking about well-being, right?
Right.
This is not just a course where you get credits. It's a course in which you not only get to spread the love to your students, but my goodness, to be able to exactly
and to yourself.
And so it's almost like a point of integrity for them to go and share. Like, this is what I'm going through. I'm also going to show you guys how to use this as well. I also like when you're talking about this story, I got goosebumps about it because we can, how do I say this? Like, it removes some of the subjectivity, because I feel like in growing up, there'd be a certain amount of information that I'd take in, and then I'd create the story about.
Right. We all do. That's how our brains work. We create.
And how this can really help with being objective and being able to see how things work or things are going on. Also, like, oh my gosh, I love the fact that this also has the implications of connection, where it's, if I have this story, you have this story, and never the twain shall meet. But to be able to think about this in a way where it's like, okay, this is who I am. I'm going to show up this way. I'm going to show up in integrity. And guess what? We can break down some of those dividers that we used to have towards each other, And I guess that's, I
mean, not you and me, because we'll always just fight, but everybody else.
I love to hate you and I hate to love you, Mitch. Right? Okay, so there's another thing that I'm thinking about as well. You talked about testing or working on this program in Niger and then in the United States. How about other cultures, cross-culturally? Have you seen these things show up?
So when you're asking the question, I'm thinking of two different things. Okay. One is that I'm actually going to Portugal in October, and while I'm in Portugal, we'll be doing a half day, on mind shifting, and we're going to be seeing if we can expand on that. And at the same time that I'm in Portugal, I'm meeting with somebody from some a couple people from some universities and somebody who has been very successful in getting European Union funding for different projects. And, one of my goals is to work with one of the universities in Portugal, which is part of the EU, and get the funding, and then whatever role that I can take to help move it forward to promote this more in Europe. And I'd love to promote it, in other places also. The other thing that you bring up is I've been a registered volunteer for AFS since 2000, and I've been the second level support. In AFS, it's a high school exchange program. So kids from around the world come and live with a family for a year. That's basically, they're living with a family for a year and they're going to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And you see all these multicultural issues that people have. When in the U.S., if I'm an authority and I'm talking to you, you better look me in the face, right? If I'm admonishing you, I expect you to look at me while I'm talking to you, and if you're not, you're disrespecting me.
Are we fighting again?
Right. But in so many cultures, either when you're subordinate to another person, you never look them in the face.
Yes.
Or when somebody's admonishing you, you don't look them in the face. You look down to show repentance. Okay? So, and this is just one of like thousands of different things. But so an American family is saying, "Oh, get this kid out of my house. They're showing no respect for me when I tell them that they're doing something wrong. They're looking down." It's like, okay, so let's learn a little bit of a culture here. Let's become fascinated anthropologists rather than judges. That's a judgment. The fact is that you're talking to the child and the child is looking down. The judgment is that they're disrespecting you. That's a story. What are some of the other stories that could exist? Maybe there's different cultures. It means different things. Mind shifting, or shifting people's mindsets so that they can become more empathetic and connect better with people who are different from them is part of mind shifting too.
Yeah, I feel like a part of this is becoming more open, becoming more curiosity.
Yeah. Curiosity and a sense of play, right?
Exactly. Now we're talking about positive psychology right now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I also want to talk about how does, when it comes to let's call it the darker times,
mm-hmm.
when it comes to adversity, when it comes to tough times,
mm-hmm.
how can doing this work, mind shifting, help with that as well? Because I hear resilience. Maybe you didn't say it, but I feel like resilience is there.
Resilience is a huge part of it. So part of it is knowing how we have parts of our own brain that are making us feel bad and recognizing that so that we're not feeling bad. So that's a part of it. Another part of it, which is more in the second course, which is we look at situations where there's going to be one right answer and we're going to do it and it's going to fix the situation.
Mm.
Okay? And so many situations aren't like that.
Mm.
But if we walk into a situation and we think there's one right answer, and so I have it, or I learned it, and so I'm just going to do this. And first of all, anybody who opposes me, that means that they're wrong because this is the right way of doing it. And then we do it, and the situation doesn't get solved. It's like, oh, I failed. I'm a complete failure. I'm an idiot. Look at me. Well, maybe if we can go into situations and understand, there are things where there is one right answer. If I'm thirsty, okay,
drink it down, Mitch.
Okay, that was the right answer. But there's a lot of things where there's multiple right answers. And so if we went into situations knowing that it was a lot less important which answer we chose than the fact that we all buy into one of them, and any one of them could have worked, but we can't go in many different directions. Okay, so that's one type of situation, and that makes us more effective in coming up with solutions if we're not locked into any one solution.
Yeah.
So that's
and I heard you talking about fixed mindset versus growth mindset in that.
Yep.
Right.
Then there's a lot of situations where nobody knows the answer. And if we think, we go into these situations thinking there's one right answer and we're just going to analyze it, or we're going to ask an expert, or we're going to come up with the right answer, and once we have the right answer, we're going to be successful. Well, a lot of situations are new or involve people, and we never know how another person is going to. So those situations, which are called, complex situations, or even more complex, or complex adaptive situations, where every time we make a change to the system, we change the actors, which change the system also. And in those situations, we have to if we have a mindset that we're going to be trying things without the expectation that they're going to completely solve the problem, but with the expectation that they're going to give us information.
Yeah.
One of the best examples was there's a woman from Finland. She was what we would call a superintendent of a medium-sized city in Finland, and she was talking to superintendents in the U.S. and she was talking about all the great things that their school system and their city had done. And her city is the happiest city in Finland. When Finland is one of the two happiest countries in the world, right? So somebody asked her a question. You're going through these things that worked. Okay, can you tell us about some of your failures? And the expression on her face was It's like she's, oh, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know something? There's been no failures because we never do anything with the expectation that it's going to succeed or it's not going to succeed. We do things so that we can get information, so that we can use that information to adjust what we're going to be doing. And
Wow.
everything that we've ever done, we've gotten information, and that's informed the next things that we do. So we just don't think in terms of failure. Well, so you say, how can you become more resilient and resourceful? If we're going into situations expecting that we're going to be trying things so that we can get information, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying things, and if they don't work, we're a failure, we become a lot more resilient and a lot more effective. And the way we try things is we want to try things that give us more information and that don't hurt us. So the number one thing is like, what can I do that isn't going to hurt us, that's going to give me some information so that I can continue to improve.
Yeah, it's great because it's reinforcing that whole idea of creativity and being open and curious, right? I also love the fact that you're now talking about, complex adaptive systems, right? Which are,
Right.
are very pliable, right? There's a
Right.
lot of jazz to be played in it,
Well-
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, look at our nation's response to COVID. Okay, we went into COVID, and the people who were in charge, basically our government, our pharmaceutical companies, they felt that they had to present the solution. So
Yep.
the first thing that they came up with was, don't wear masks. They don't do any good. We're the authorities. We're the experts. Don't wear masks. They don't do any good. Then 6 weeks later, right? 4 weeks later, it's like, everybody needs to wear a mask. It's the only thing that works. But if you wear a mask, you won't catch COVID. And then it's like, well, it's not just wearing a mask, it's the type of mask. And then it's like, well, if you wear a mask, you're a little bit less likely to do COVID. Then it's like, get the vaccine. If you get the vaccine, you will never catch COVID. If the attitude had been, we don't know the answer because this is a novel virus.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever seen it before. We're going to recommend that we try something, and we're going to really monitor the results to figure out whether this is working and what we need to do to adjust.
Yeah.
We never got the data because we were so sure that what we did was working. And then when we did 180-degree and went in the other direction, it's like we look like idiots, or the authorities look like idiots, and you lose all trust in them.
Well, I got my master's in public health. That's what we were taught.
Right. Okay.
We were taught to be crazy. No, not at all. And I love that, because there's the piece there of, yeah, we need to figure this out, and we need to figure this out together.
Together,
this is
right.
And this is as much as we know, and the rest we're still trying to figure out. So please, boom, 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 for this
Right,
sake.
and that science is coming up with a hypothesis, trying it out, looking at the data, and then coming up with the next hypothesis.
The no, yeah.
Right. Science is not the like, okay, here's the rule, everybody follow this rule.
Completely.
Right?
Completely.
It's like, here's what we think the rule is, let's try to disprove it.
All of it. I'm Mitch, I was already drawn to you. I'm all in, my friend.
Well, great. Good. I think we're both trying to do the same thing.
Yeah. Now I know that you're building a community around that. Why should you, what's the reasoning behind creating that community? And I feel like this wasn't an easy one because I just talked about us doing it together. What goes on in that community?
Well, so the community is just getting started. What happened was I was observing, people come and take a course, and they learn, and then the course ends, and they know some new techniques, they know some concepts, but they don't really get a chance to continue to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that, it's almost like, you're dirty and you take a shower, okay, but that doesn't get you clean forever. It just gets you clean for a while, and then you need to refresh it. So I asked actually some of the people in the last couple courses is like, if we put together a community and you had an opportunity to share your stories and share your challenges and brainstorm solutions to your challenges, is that something that would be attractive to you? So that's how the community
Yeah.
That was the idea for the community. And so right now, the community is designed for people who have taken a mind shifting course and to continue to develop their practice. So they already know the terms about,
Yeah.
saboteurs and part X and the powers of the resilient mind and the sage perspective. They have that vocabulary and they know it. But they're saying, something, I had this problem with this kid in class today, and this is what happened. And it's like, other people can chime in and
Yeah.
mastermind it.
One thing I like about the way that your community is set up is it feels very multimodal and multidimensional, multidisciplinarian, where I can come in saying, hey, I've got, when it comes to education, this is the issue that's coming up. Or, when it comes to educating my clients around, I don't know, cross-cultural, cross-cultural development, I feel like I could be included in that, in that discussion.
Yeah. And it's not just, so just another really interesting vignette from, one of the people in the course. She and a friend of hers were helping a third friend who was getting out of an abusive relationship and moving with her 2 kids into another apartment. Okay. And that third friend had a to-do list of things that she was going to be doing. And they were just going to bring over the furniture to the new apartment. And when they went to pick up their third friend, they found that that third friend had not done any of the things that was on the list. And so this meant that it wasn't just going to be bringing her to the apartment. It meant that they were going to be spending the full day and maybe even 2 days helping her. And the immediate reaction was, if she's not going to do the stuff for herself, then why is she imposing on us to do all the work that she should have done for herself? And it's like, then one of them who was in the course says, well, wait a minute, you know something? That's my saboteur mind beating me up. So I can't just combat that right away. You know what I need to do? I need to quiet that saboteur mind for a minute.
Oh my God.
And I've got to come back to what's really important to me. And when she came back to what was really important to her, it's like, I have this friend who needs a safe place. And she's not in a position where she can help herself right now. But the 2 of us can help her and get her in the right position. And so she changed herself around and she changed her friend around. And they decided the most important thing was to help their friend get settled. And the friend did. And so that's, it's not just what happens in the classroom. It's not just what happens, for a teacher. It's what happened for all of us in our life.
I mean, talk about a highly conscious person who's able to be in the moment, but also to see themselves in that kind of moment. Right. And I feel like that's where the change is beginning to happen. Is it's not just in that brain that's making all these decisions before the wisdom brain who can come out. It's being able to step away and say, okay, this is what's going on.
Yeah. Just another vignette. So my daughter has a 3-year-old. Okay. So, I was over, and my daughter and my son-in-law were gonna go out for a few hours, and my wife and I guess, were gonna take care of the 3-year-old. And as soon as my daughter and son-in-law left the room, it's like, I want my mommy, I want my daddy, I want my mommy, I want my daddy. So instead of like arguing or anything like that, basically, I just kind of like held him in my lap and just kind of rocking back and forth to establish a connection more than anything else. And, after, 5 minutes of that or stuff, I just started singing some of the songs that he knew. In 10 minutes, he looks up to me, and he calls me Baba, okay? He says, Baba, I was really upset before, but I'm okay now. Let's play, And that's
completely. That's amazing. And then he pooped himself.
Right, yeah.
Incredible. I want to ask, what got you into this? Because you have been kind of playing your hand, like, I love education, 20 years. What is that kind of story behind you creating this? Well,
so the story behind creating this, I advised education technology. I advised education publishers on education technology. And as part of doing that, I developed somewhat of a reputation. And once a year, I went down to University of Pennsylvania and I taught in a one half day thing where it was a combination of the Wharton School of Business and the University of Pennsylvania School of Education, kind of getting people ready for become ed tech entrepreneurs. And so I was on a list, and this university in Niger contacted them, and so I was one of maybe 200 or 300 people who got contacted from this university saying, we would like ed tech entrepreneurs to talk to our undergraduates about education technology.
Okay.
And my response was, having U.S. based person talk to undergraduates in Niger about education technology in the U.S., I don't think that's going to be particularly helpful to them. But I've always been interested in how the brain makes sense of situations and how we can sometimes make really good decisions, and how some people become successful and some people get locked into decisions that are against their best interest. So why don't I teach a course to your undergraduates on sense making, on how to do that? Because I wasn't calling it mind shifting then. It just, the word sense making popped into my head, and that's what I put into and then I get a response back, said, can you come here for a semester? And it's like, I can't come there for a semester and teach this course. And so we talked, we did our Zoom sessions or whatever, and we came up we were talking in June, and the idea was that in February I would go to Niger and I would teach two-day workshops to 60 to 70 of their kids. So we electronically shook hands on this. Okay. And then like 15 minutes later, I'm like, Mitch, you idiot. You've never taught this before. You have no idea how to teach these things. This has just been something that you were interested in. Why did you get yourself into this? And so
sounds like a saboteur to me.
Right. So I sat down, I read 11 books. I watched videos on things. I read books on, cognitive science, neuroscience, psychology, coaching, sales, economics, all kinds of things that were involved with making different types of decisions. And what I found was that there's different slices of this in each one of these different fields, but there wasn't anything that I could see that really put it all together. So I then put it together in this course. And then when I taught the course and the kids, I would say, and that's it for sense making. And then 70 kids jumped up and said, yeah, that was great. It was like, okay, something, I've hit a nerve here. So this is something that people really need and really value. So that's really that's how I got into it.
Sing to us, Baba.
Right.
One at a time. Okay, I know that we're coming close, but
yes,
I don't know if you know my producer, Manny. He actually wants to play a game with you if you're okay with that.
I'm good. I'm good with games. I love games.
Are you competitive?
No, actually, I'm not.
Okay, because no one's ever passed this game, including Stacy Pong, who was just on the show.
Well, that's all right. That's all right. It'll be fun.
Yes, it's gonna be fun. So essentially, my business is called the Joy Revolution, right? And so Manny wants to know how you embody joy, my friend. So I'm gonna ask a question that he wants me to ask, and then you just fill in the blank with one word or as far as you want to go with that. All right. So the first question is: joy sounds like
kids laughing.
Kids laughing. My goodness. I'm looking into his production room. He's standing like this, and kids are in a circle, and he's laughing with them. My goodness. How did you get that one, Mitch? +1 for you, Mitch.
No, it's just, to me, it's, kids aren't scripted. Okay? Kids are natural. And in our natural state, we, you see them, their entire body is happy when they're happy.
Yep. Completely.
And to me, that's joy. And we can all do that.
I would love to see mind shifting around emotional contagion, because that's becoming such a big field now.
Right. Well, that's in the third course.
Look at that.
Right. That's in Mind Shifting 3. Okay.
Manny gave you an extra point for being swift with the call to action there, man. Okay. Well done. Okay. Joy tastes like
fine wine. So to me,
fine wine.
it's like when I taste when I am really focused in on tasting fine wine, it's like your senses it just explode because you're tasting the fruit, you're tasting the oak, you're tasting the earth. The taste and the smells change over time. It's like
Yeah.
that can be very. And I realize that different people different. Some people it would be like, oh, it's an Oreo. For other people, it's like taking into a bite of steak.
Manny has a follow-up question.
Okay.
White or red?
Wine?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any difference. I love wine. It doesn't, and I don't really care how much it costs. It could be a $5 bottle of wine. It doesn't make any difference. It's just like if it's got all these different flavors, I'm happy.
Manny's opening a $3 thing of wine there.
Good for him.
He's actually twisting the top
Okay.
off.
Well, my wife actually came in here and because it's and she was like motioning me like
it's time. It's time. It is time. Manny, hold up, Manny. He's got to go. Okay. Joy looks like.
So I'm imagining some little kid at a beach just turning over shells to see what's underneath them and just going from shell to shell. And they're just enjoying it.
Manny, kid on the beach turning over shells. Manny's he's opening his door, and there's actually a beach outside of the door.
Wow, good
There's
for Manny.
There's a kid turning over shells.
Yeah.
And Manny slams the door. He doesn't like it at all. Minus 1,000 points.
Right. Okay.
You're at negative 997 points.
That's okay.
Right?
Joy is different things to different people.
Right? And so here's the last question. Just give it your best. Joy smells like.
So if I'm like out in the woods and I'm smelling the different aromas of the different types of plants and leaves, and there's some detritus there, and there's animals and stuff like that. To me, that's very joyful.
Yeah. Manny's opening his door again.
He's gonna.
It's the middle of a forest.
Right. Right.
He's taking it in. He's taking it. My goodness, a single tear is falling down his face. It is the smell of the forest. Positive 998 points.
You never know.
You win by 1 point, my friend. Now, I want you to, we're going to go into the extra credit, which is with me. But I want to make sure, Mitch, that I give proper respect to the next course that's coming out for you. And that's going to be, if you're listening right now and it's September, October, this course is Flexible Mindsets for Long-Term Success. It costs $150, but we do have a code in the description to get $50 off. It's only $100. And guess what? If you loved what was going on here with Mitch, he can take it even deeper with you.
And I'll just say, a course is 6 2-hour live sessions. So it's not like, you're not just taking a 2-hour course. You are interacting with other people in the course over 6 sessions, 2 hours each, and trying different things and reflecting on them and coming back and brainstorming them with the other people in the class.
I feel it's been a great wind up in terms of, we talked about mindset, we talked about community, we talked about connection with other folks, and it just feels like that's a natural extension of our conversation here. Mitch.
Well, because you're such a good host. Thank you.
Hey, I answer every one of those 60 emails you sent me.
Right? Yes, you did.
So I want to go into the extra credit, which is this. Not only the name of my company, but a course that I teach is called the Joy Revolution.
Right.
And oftentimes a joy revolution can be this inner one where it feels like your heart is full and overlapping or outpouring into your. I'm getting goosebumps with I'm stuttering, right?
Right.
And then there's also joy revolutions where you can use joy to create social change, right? It's an external revolution. So for you, Mitch, I'm about to ask you, what is your joy revolution? Mitch, what is your joy revolution?
Well, my joy revolution is when I see people doing things that they never thought that they could do before, and knowing that I had a small part in helping them do that, it's like, wow, that's joyful to me.
I love it. I've had a blast. I don't know if you did.
Yeah,
but
I really enjoyed
me too.
Your questions, talking with you, your knowledge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome, my
Thank you,
friend.
Marc.
So, on behalf of Manny and Mitch and myself, thank you for listening. For your sake, for my sake, for goodness sake, start your revolution. Start it
Yes.
in love, in light, in shadow, and in joy, baby. Thank you, Mitch.